Welcome to today's Explainer. We're launching right into a documentary-style investigation into how information can be, well, systematically manipulated to completely rewrite history. We're diving into a really fascinating academic article by BBensoula and Fatima Hafi. It's titled Les événements de 8 mai 1945 dans la presse française, couverture coloniale et transformation de la mémoire historique. This study forensically examines how the French press shaped, suppressed, and eventually reshaped the public memory of a profound tragedy.
To set the stage, we really have to contrast the official historical narrative of the time with the grim, on-the-ground reality. Picture this. It's May 8, 1945. The whole world is celebrating VE Day, marking the massive triumph over fascism in Europe. But on that exact same day, in Algerian cities like Sétif, Galma, and Karada, peaceful protests by Algerians demanding the independence they had literally just fought for alongside the Allies were met with brutal suppression by French colonial authorities. It's an incredibly profound duality of historical memory.
So let's nail down exactly what we mean when we talk about the propaganda machine of the time. The French media framing strategy wasn't just, standard biased reporting. It was the systematic manipulation of language, the outright suppression of facts, and the selective structuring of content by the press. The ultimate goal here? To legitimize state authority and serve colonial interests. The media was operating under strict government censorship, actively working to portray colonization as this noble, civilizing mission, rather than actually reporting the horrific facts as they unfolded.
To truly understand how this media manipulation functioned, the authors conducted a meticulous content analysis of the prominent French newspaper, Le Monde, and their investigation breaks down into three distinct historical phases. We've got Phase 1, the immediate aftermath in 1945, focusing on active cover-up. Then Phase 2 covers the post-independence years from 1985 to 1995, characterized by shifting blame. And finally, Phase 3 brings us into the digital era, from 2005 to today, which is all about the historical reckoning. Let's walk through this timeline.
Phase 1. The active cover-up in 1945. Demonization and silencing the truth. The actual language used by the press during this time is honestly shocking. We're talking about phrases like tribus berbères incultes et misérables, which translates to uncultured and miserable Berber tribes. This was actually printed in Le Monde on May 16, 1945, sourced directly from a Ministry of the Interior note. It's explicitly racist and inflammatory language, deliberately used to criminalize the victims and justify a massive, deadly military crackdown to the public back home. And this perfectly illustrates that massive gap between state-sponsored propaganda and historical evidence. On one hand, you have the official French media narrative describing the events using sanitized words like disturbances or riots caused by armed gangs. It suggests the colonial military was simply stepping in to protect people and restore public order. But then you look at the historical reality. Tens of thousands of unarmed Algerian civilians were massacred simply for demanding basic human rights. The linguistic framing effectively reversed the roles, totally portraying the victims as the aggressors.
Here is a highly specific, totally fascinating detail uncovered in the study, the number 3. In that official 1945 ministry note we just talked about, the word wheat, or blé in French, was specifically mentioned 3 times. Now, why does this matter? Well, because the media was weaponizing economic fear. By framing the Algerian uprising as a direct threat to France's vital food supplies, the press convinced the French public that these uprisings endangered their very own dinner tables. It made the brutal repression seem like an absolute necessity.
Moving on to Phase 2, the shifting alibi. Post-independence justifications from 1985 to 1995.
So, following Algeria's independence, the press actually stopped using that overtly inflammatory language of 1945, and instead, they started projecting this veneer of neutrality. They replaced the word massacres with much softer terms like riots or repression. They attempted to shift the blame away from the state and onto German agents or local insurgents. They even attributed the tension entirely to economic shortages, completely ignoring decades of systemic colonial oppression. They essentially partially acknowledged the events, but carefully deflected any direct responsibility. It's a classic evasive tactic.
The absolutely crucial point in this phase is the staggering discrepancy in human losses. While the French press published casualty estimates of anywhere from 2,000 to 15,000 victims, Algerian historical sources document upwards of 80,000 dead. That is a massive, massive gap, and it demonstrates a continued, deliberate effort by the media to minimize the true horrific scale of the tragedy, even long after the colonial empire had fallen.
And the shift in their strategy is actually perfectly captured in the data. Just look at the average word count of Le Monde articles covering the events across these three phases. In 1945, articles averaged a mere 374 words. They kept it incredibly brief to basically suppress public awareness. But then, in Phase 2, the word count absolutely explodes to over 2,000 words per article. The press was now having to build complex, academic-sounding justifications for the violence. They literally needed thousands of words to construct their shifting alibi.
Finally, we arrive at Phase 3, a digital reckoning. New media and alternative voices from 2005 to 2025.
The other, May 8, 1945. This powerful phrase represents a major breakthrough in modern coverage. The press finally began to starkly juxtapose the joyous celebration of European liberation with the violent, forgotten suppression in Algeria. It's a direct, unavoidable confrontation with the hypocrisy embedded in the official historical memory. A framing that, let's be real, would have been completely censored back in 1945.
But what actually drove this sudden reckoning? Well, it was a paradigm shift led totally from the ground up. It was driven by the rapid proliferation of independent digital media platforms that could finally bypass traditional gatekeepers. Add to that the tireless advocacy by Algerian activists in France and the relentless pressure from critical contemporary historians who just refused to let the evidence be ignored. Together, these forces successfully pierced the official silence, loudly demanding accountability and proper documentation of the atrocities.
When you look at the forensic timeline of this investigation, it tracks a pretty remarkable journey. In 1945, state-sponsored media engaged in an active cover-up, fully criminalizing the victims. Jump to 1985, and the strategy had morphed into evasive framing and minimizing casualties. But by 2025, persistent activism and alternative media slowly forced the press to transition to clear academic recognition, finally and officially acknowledging the events as a colonial massacre.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. If the official press could actively hide the scale and reality of such a massive tragedy for over half a century, what other accepted historical narratives are out there, just waiting to be dismantled by documentary evidence and today's digital media? It's a pretty wild thought, right? It's a powerful reminder to always question the narrative, dig for the historical truth, and recognize the immense power of the press. Thanks so much for joining me on this investigation. Keep questioning everything, and I'll see you on the next explainer.